Hi, I'm Dorona King. I'm the Director of Citizen Advocacy of Atlanta and DeKalb.
And I'm Aaron Lischke. I'm the coordinator of Citizen Advocacy for the last 3 years, getting to work with Dorona.
Yeah, we're really glad to share with you all a bit about the work that we do. Citizen Advocacy, we're a local nonprofit here in Atlanta and DeKalb. Local people make up our board as well as staff. Our sole mission is to provide protection and advocacy to people experiencing situations of abuse or neglect or social isolation because of disability discrimination. And we do that by connecting ordinary people who maybe bring a specific gift or quality to a very specific person who's living with a disability to establish a relationship that will, in the long run, provide some protection.
Yeah.
As we talk about some of the history of citizen advocacy, some of the things that make this unique form of advocacy so important is this aspect of not only relationship but ongoing and sometimes lifelong connections for people. And I began this work back in the early 90s, so that meant that there was some history before I even came along, and there's stories that we still get to share and tell and support relationship wise. And I think about the story of Nick and Gail. That was actually a relationship and is still an existing relationship that is going on 41 years of connection, where Gail was a young woman at the time. She's a woman who lives with an intellectual disability and was experiencing a lot of a risk around personal safety, as well as people taking advantage of her finances and being able to manage her funding. And so her Social Security resources and some of the roles citizen advocates play in people's lives are varied. Some are very specific. Some cover a gamut. And so Nick was a man who was starting his own real estate business at the time and was managing his own company and finances, living in Northwest Atlanta, not far from where Gail was at the time. And so he was invited to be Gail's Social Security representative payee as a citizen advocate, and that meant that he would be the person who would receive her and help her manage her bank account, make sure that her rent was paid, and that whatever resources she needed along the way would happen. Well, he was very, very good at that, and through that relationship, got to know Gail pretty well. And about the time that they became matched, Gail actually was pregnant and had her first baby as a very young woman. And these children, and she has several children now, and they're all, as you can imagine, 40 and in their late 30s. Well, through the years, Nick became Uncle Nick, and he provided a lot of really hands-on protection and instrumental advocacy for Gail. But there was something really powerful that happened along the way when these two lives connected. As her Gail's daughter was going to school, something that typically happens for parents of children who have disabilities, that a child almost gets the stigma of the label that the parent has. And that happened for Gail's daughter, who did not have a disability, and Atlanta City Schools wanted her to be in a special education classroom. But because Nick was really involved very closely in Gail's life and knew that her daughter certainly did not need to be in a special education class, he really worked hard for her to not only be in typical classroom, but thought, well, this is my child, where would she be? And found an incredible school for her. And so this little girl, who was supposed to have a learning disability because the assumption was she would because her mom did, not only went to a really good school, she wound up being class president and graduating. And some years ago, I can remember when Nick himself needed some support. He had hip replacement surgery and he couldn't drive himself around when he needed to and wanted to continue to work. It was Gail's daughter, the now grown woman, who was able to say, hey, I can do that. I can take you here and there. And the relationship was so strong with the family of always making sure they had a safe place to live, that when the now grown baby of Gail got married, guess who walked her down the aisle and gave her away? It was her Uncle Nick. So when we talk about ongoing reciprocal relationship and the power of that in community, it's really important. It's not, we say one-to-one because Nick is Gail's citizen advocate, but it really is about impacting and expanding relationship and community to someone who's at risk and for someone who's living on pretty solid footing. Well, Nick has gotten pretty old. He is now in his 80s and himself has had some memory loss, but if you talk to him, he will, Gail will always be his very good friend. How citizen advocacy has been able to keep the protection aspect for Gail is when Nick realized that he himself might need some support and he wasn't the best person to continue to help Gail with her resources, is that we were able, with Nick's support, to identify another citizen advocate who is a young man who is also has his own business and is really good with finances and has come into the picture and now has expanded. There's almost this trinity of support going on in Gail's life. And so when we talk about ongoing, in this case, some lifelong support for someone whose life would have gone very differently had Nick not been involved. That's the kind of stories citizen advocacy can tell.